Greetings. It's Thursday, the 7th of August, 2025. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Midweek Report. A shooting at a military base in Georgia. A 28-year-old sergeant opened fire with a pistol at his place of work at Fort Stewart. He injured 5 of his co-workers. Thankfully, nobody was killed. All the victims are listed as being in stable condition. But if you know anything about gunshot wounds, that means that things could still go in a bad direction. The shooter was detained. He survived. He was subdued by others nearby, and good on them. He's been identified as Sergeant Cornelius Radford. No idea how that first name is pronounced properly, as spelling is far from the common usage. It was probably Cornelius, but, well, you never know these days. Says something about how our society functions now, doesn't it? It's not known what the motive behind the crime was, but it's being reported that this fellow has had run-ins with authorities before, had a DUI a couple of months ago. For some reason, there are more people than usual in our midst who can't control themselves and think their actions don't have consequences. I wonder why. Meanwhile, further up the federal food chain, the Trump administration is still playing the role of bull in the china shop of international politics and diplomacy. All of the remarks by the president about nuclear weapons and war, along with the tariffs and other policies behind them, it's starting to come home to roost. Apologies for yet another American idiom being inserted. Much of the world that was filled with so much optimism for the post-Biden Trump administration is quickly losing hope, as well as patience. News this morning is that Russian President Putin will be meeting soon with U.S. President Trump, possibly in the United Arab Emirates. This might sound like a good idea, but summits can go south and lead to all sorts of bad things if one of the participants gives the wrong impression to the other. When President Kennedy met with Chairman Khrushchev in Vienna in 1961, the young American leader who had just entered office and messed up big time with the Bay of Pigs invasion, well, it was thought that things would be a lot better after the two leaders of the two superpowers met, but it didn't go that way. Kennedy came across to Khrushchev as being weak and naive, and that impression is widely thought to have played a major role in the creation of the Cuban Missile Crisis the following year. Still, action in such cases is better than reaction. But the Trump administration has to come to the realization that the U.S. is not at the top of the global pyramid anymore. The views and opinions of the other nations who inhabit this world are still quite relevant, more so than ever. And even though the U.S. was arguably the top dog back in the early 1960s, then President Kennedy understood that reality and was able to use it to his advantage. Perhaps a lesson that needs to be relearned. Meanwhile, the Epstein case continues to move forward. Republican congressmen have subpoenaed Bill and Hillary Clinton, Eric Holder, Mr. Mueller, Garland, and Comey there to testify about what they know regarding the late Jeffrey Epstein. This will be interesting, I say as I rub my palms together. Remember what I said a couple of weeks ago about things starting to get delicious when you hear about friends and associates of the Epstein crime family, quote, lawyering up, unquote? Well, it's happening. And Ms. Maxwell, Mr. Epstein's former lover and madame, continues to cooperate with federal authorities, and she's still alive in her new low-security prison cell. My goodness, will wonders never cease? And speaking about crimes nobody wants to talk about, is anybody noticing that Christians and other religious minorities are being slaughtered, genocided, in what was once Syria? No? Nobody? Not even other Christians? The same ones here in the United States who are so supportive of Israel. No calls for action to save members of your shared religion from being brutally killed? No words of protest? Well, I'm not surprised, sadly. Closer to home, President Trump is now threatening to return Washington, D.C. to direct federal control. You notice that I use the term return, as the District of Columbia was run by the feds until 1973. That's when, in a fit of political correctness, Congress passed something called the Home Rule Act, which gave the people living in the District of Columbia the power to run their own affairs, something they have done an abysmal job in doing. Congress still has the power to overturn local laws, but seldom takes such action. Take it from somebody who lived there for several years. Washington, D.C. is one of the worst-run cities in the United States. Many of the people who govern it are stupid, uneducated, and corrupt. The life and times of the late Mayor Marion Barry, now lauded as a hero and honored with a statue in front of City Hall. Well, look into that guy's background and history. You'll find it rather entertaining, to say the least. I've never felt that statue was a very realistic depiction of the man, as the sculptor didn't include a crack pipe in one of his hands. Actually, this is a good idea, and I endorse it 100%. D.C. is a crime-centric, corrupt sewer of a city with delusions that it should be made a state. Returning the nation's capital to sanity and good government is long overdue, and I would imagine many of the city's residents, either rich or poor, would agree. And speaking of bad government, a source in South Africa called my attention to a man who could very well be the next president of that nation. And I'm not talking about that fellow in the red beret who regularly dances on a stage calling for the murder of white farmers in front of thousands and thousands of enthusiastic followers. No, this is somebody else. And sadly, nobody in the mainstream media is following this guy. Yet. His name is Fikile Mbalula. It's spelled Fikile. His last name is Mbalula. He's a senior leader of the infamous African National Congress, and he just held a press conference on Wednesday following some sort of meeting that racist Communist political party just concluded. And although shocking, what he talked about was not surprising. The so-called government of that once beautiful first world country is hell-bent on the continued programs aimed at genocide of the various racial minorities there, and not just white people, but those whose ancestors came from South Asia, like India, along with mixed-race citizens. It's not easy to find this press conference online, so I'll provide a link up on my Substack notes section and other social media accounts where you can find me. There's a video with a commentator, which I'll put up there, who was once a member of South Africa's parliament. Very insightful. And this is what I'm going to leave you with today. The politically incorrect reality about the so-called diversity movement that has failed our world miserably. Because, well, the world is a very diverse place, meaning that people and peoples are very different. In South Africa, there have been cases recently of decapitations of children by what are being referred to in their media as, quote, traditional healers, unquote. I'll spare you the details of how these witch doctors do things, but your imagination is not far from the truth. And there are reports of the same sort of thing going on in the United Kingdom, in London. Yes, London, Great Britain. A nation that once brought civilization to the world is now having it taken away from them in their own land. Why should such a thing have ever been permitted to come to pass? Well, the reality is obvious, but the liberal Marxist establishment refuses to face what horror they have visited upon so many in so many countries, especially the United States. Let me give you some personal examples. Less than 2 miles from where I once lived in Northern Virginia, very close to our nation's capital, a young woman was killed by having her heart cut out by her MS-13 member boyfriend, apparently while she was still alive. I also lived about half a mile from the apartment of a woman who was decapitated by an African immigrant who had been stalking her for some time. The local police called the murder a, quote, stabbing, unquote, back then, but I learned from my sources that her head was removed from her body. I guess the authorities didn't want to spread any more panic among the local population than was necessary, but I left the area anyway. What I'm getting at here is that peoples who are rejects from their own countries, and those countries are not very advanced to begin with, do not the best Western citizens make, not by any stretch of the imagination. Are there reasonably run countries in Africa? Yes, there are. I've been to a couple. Some are quite nice and reasonably peaceful places. But the African National Congress of South Africa is an affront to the continent from which it takes its name, as well as all of humanity, of which it claims membership. The ANC have become monsters, if indeed they were ever anything else. They have more than 150 laws in that country that enforce racial discrimination against anyone who isn't a black African. And some of these policies make the Jim Crow laws of the old American South appear tame in comparison. Yes, really. So if you liberal types out there are looking for some real racism to fight against, or savage barbarity by peoples who cannot ever come close to practicing your own levels of decency and decorum, look no further than South Africa or your own backyard. And be forewarned, those of you who claim to be law-abiding citizens but are nothing of the sort. The illegal invaders so many of you left-wing Americans regularly pick up at shopping center parking lots so you can pay them a pittance to trim your lawns or clean out your garage or wipe up your toilets will more than likely someday turn on you. The people of South Africa and the United Kingdom learned that lesson the hard way, but they learned it far too late to do anything about it for themselves or their once great nation. The age of insanity that has descended upon the West will end, one way or the other. That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share. Share with your friends and share with your enemies, especially if they're law-abiding citizens and want to see peace and harmony returned to our lands. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. This podcast originates at Substack. My handle there is aureliancolumn.substack.com. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember Clown World, the Deep State, and all those who will visit genocide on people who are different from themselves must be destroyed. Good day.